The call came on a gray November afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my Portland office. My father's name flashed across the screen, and for a moment I allowed myself a small hope. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe, for once, he was reaching out with something other than a perfunctory update. "Celeste," he said, his voice clipped, businesslike. "About Thanksgiving." I waited, pen poised above the page. "Your mother and I have decided it would be best if you didn't come this year." He paused, only long enough for the weight of the words to settle. "Marina is bringing Adrian, and we want things to go smoothly. He comes from a very respectable family, and we don't want complications." Complications. That was what I had become to them. Not a daughter. Not even an afterthought, just a potential embarrassment in a room they wanted polished for someone else. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I see." I managed. "Good," he said, relief evident. "We'll talk after the holidays." Then the line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, staring at the city skyline beyond my office window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the outlines of bridges and buildings. For years, I had known the truth that Marina was the chosen one, the one to be celebrated. Still, hearing the rejection stated so plainly reopened wounds I thought I had buried. I leaned back in my chair, forcing my breathing steady. I had built a life of substance, a company from nothing, yet in their eyes I was still less than my sister's +1. The old ache of invisibility pressed in, but beneath it, something else flickered a spark I hadn't felt in years, and with that spark, memories I had tried to leave behind began to stir. The memories came back as they always did quietly at first, then all at once, like a film I couldn't stop replaying. Eugene in the late 90s smelled of wet pine and wood smoke, but inside our house it was all about Marina. My sister's piano recitals drew a crowd of parents, teachers, and neighbors who clapped as though she were destined for Carnegie Hall. When she traded piano keys for tennis rackets, Dad drove her to lessons 3 times a week and cheered from the sidelines, rain or shine. I remember standing by the kitchen doorway, holding the program from my debate tournament, waiting for someone to ask how it went. They never did. Mom was fussing with Marina's costume, Dad reminding her to smile for the camera, and I learned that silence was easier than asking for space that was never offered. By the time Marina turned 16, there was a shiny silver Honda parked in the driveway with a bow on top. "She'll need it to get to practice," Dad explained, his arm draped proudly around her shoulders. When I asked about a car for myself, he shook his head. "You're resourceful, Celeste. You'll figure something out." And I did walking, biking, scraping together money for bus fare while working after-school shifts at the local diner. College was no different. The savings account my parents had built for Marina's tuition had been accumulating since she was born. When it came time for me, Dad's words were blunt. "We always knew Marina would need more support. You've always been independent." Independence, their word for neglect, became the foundation of my life. Scholarships, loans, part-time jobs I pieced together what they wouldn't give. And though I carried resentment, I also carried a fire that no one else could claim credit for lighting. That fire smoldered through every sleepless night and every rejection, preparing me for the life I was determined to build far beyond Eugene. Oregon State was where I learned how far exhaustion could stretch a body. My days started before sunrise at the campus library, shelving books for minimum wage. Afternoons, I served coffee at a crowded cafe near downtown Corvallis. Evenings, I closed shifts at a diner off Monroe Avenue. In between, I crammed lectures, labs, and any spare moment I could steal to practice coding on a second-hand laptop that overheated if I pushed it too hard. Sleep became optional. Determination was mandatory. I told myself that if my parents couldn't or wouldn't invest in me, I would invest in myself until there was nothing left to give. 4 years blurred into one long grind, but I walked across that stage with honors. a degree in computer science and business administration clutched in my hands. After graduation, I moved north to Portland and found work at a small startup tucked into a converted warehouse. The pay was barely enough to cover rent in a crumbling studio, but the work was priceless. I stayed late after everyone left, teaching myself the systems they used until I understood them better than the managers who signed my paychecks. My weekends were spent sketching out ideas that no one asked for, chasing the notion that I could build something different, something sharper. Meanwhile, Marina floated. One month she was interning at a boutique fashion line in Los Angeles. The next, she was curating social media content for an influencer she claimed was about to blow up. She sent glossy photos from rooftop parties, her life lit in neon. While I coded through the night with takeout cartons piled at my desk, I stopped waiting for my parents to notice the difference. Their calls were filled with Marina's stories, her supposed adventures, while I bit my tongue and turned my silence into fuel. By the time I pitched my first product to investors, I was used to skepticism. They saw a young woman with no safety net and no last name that opened doors. But I knew how to push through doubt. I had been doing it my whole life, and I wasn't about to stop. Thanksgiving morning crept in under a sky the color of steel. From my Pearl District apartment, I could hear the faint echo of parade coverage drifting from a neighbor's television. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in work, but the notifications buzzing on my phone betrayed me. Marina's post appeared first, her arm looped possessively through Adrian's, the two of them flanked by my parents in front of the familiar oak dining table. My father's smile was wide. My mother's hand rested gently on Adrian's sleeve, and Marina's caption read, "So grateful for family and new beginnings." I stared at the photo longer than I should have, the ache pressing hard against my chest. 5 bedrooms in that old house. Yet somehow there had been no room for me. By noon, I gave up pretending the day would pass like any other. I heated soup from a can, sat at the counter, and told myself solitude was strength. But the walls felt closer than usual, the silence louder. The phone rang. Rowan's voice filled the line before I could greet him. "You're not spending the day alone. Celeste. Get over here. My mom has more food than we can eat, and she's been asking about you." I resisted, mumbling excuses about work, but Rowan cut me off. "No, bring a bottle of wine if you must, but get in the car. You've been family to me since freshman year, and that means you're family to them too." An hour later, I walked into the warmth of his parents' house in northwest Portland. The scent of sage and roasted turkey wrapped around me. Rowan's nieces darted between adults carrying plates, and his father carved meat with the practiced ease of decades. A place was set for me without question, a glass filled before I asked. I laughed more than I expected. Listening to stories that weren't mine yet still made room for me. Rowan's mother pressed a second slice of pie into my hands, saying simply, "Eat. You belong here." That night, driving home past streets strung with holiday lights, I realized belonging wasn't about bloodlines. It was about doors that opened and chairs that stayed empty until you arrived. And as December approached, I buried myself once more in work, certain I would need that reminder soon. December blurred into long nights at the office, my team pushing to close out contracts that would shape the next year. When the signatures finally dried, we had secured deals with 2 major West Coast firms' partnerships that would take our platform from promising to indispensable. By January, I was flying between Portland and Seattle weekly, overseeing the opening of a second office with a view of Elliott Bay. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead it felt like momentum finally catching up with years of work. When Forbes named me one of their tech women to watch, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the glossy spread with a strange mix of disbelief and pride. My name mine printed in bold letters that no one could ignore. I decided, against better judgment, to call home. Maybe this time they would hear me. Mom answered, her voice warm but hurried. "Celeste, dear, it's late. Is everything all right? I wanted to share some news." I began carefully. Techvision just opened an office in Seattle, and Forbes featured me this month. That's nice, she interrupted, her tone already shifting. You'll never guess Marina and Adrian are thinking about moving to Boston. Adrian's been offered a promotion at his firm. It would be such a step up for them, living back east among his family's circles. Can you imagine? I closed my eyes, my free hand tightening around the arm of the chair. That's great for them, I said evenly. Oh, it is, she gushed. Everyone is so impressed with Adrian. His firm has the most prestigious clients. Marina will love it there. I listened as she wove a tapestry of borrowed prestige, Adrian's salary, Adrian's lineage, Adrian's promising career. My accomplishments vanished beneath the noise of someone else's borrowed shine. When the call ended, I sat in silence, the magazine still open on my lap. The world outside my family saw me, celebrated me, validated the years of sacrifice. Yet in the house where I had once begged for recognition, nothing had changed. Marina remained the star, even when the light was only reflected from someone else. I folded the magazine shut and set it aside. If their attention came only through Adrian's shadow, then I would stop seeking it. My worth wasn't theirs to acknowledge or erase. By February, contracts multiplied, new hires filled the Seattle office, and I worked later than ever. The ache of exclusion was still there, but so was a new clarity, one that would matter even more the day Leona from HR knocked on my door carrying a folder with my sister's name on it. It was a wet February morning when Leona tapped on my office door, a folder tucked under her arm. She had that half smile she wore when something was amusing but also delicate. I gestured for her to come in, bracing myself for whatever curveball the day had decided to throw. We've been narrowing down applications for the senior strategy role, she began, placing the folder on my desk. I thought you might want to see this one yourself. I flipped open the file and froze. At the top, in bold letters, was my sister's name, Marina Hartwell. Her resume was polished, the formatting crisp, but the content was another matter. Executive consultant at a boutique firm that had long since folded. Lead strategist on campaigns I knew she had merely tagged along for. Skills listed as though she were fluent in languages of code she had never studied. It was the same Marina I had always known, confidence first. Substance optional. I looked up at Leona, who raised an eyebrow. She applied through the general portal. I don't think she realized who sits in this office. Of course she hadn't. My public profile was sparse, the press releases often using my middle name, Victoria, for privacy. To Marina, Techvision was just another company hiring, another rung she could skip to reach the top. For a moment, old resentment flared. After all the years she had been lifted at my expense, here she was again, reaching for something I had built with no acknowledgement of what it cost me. I closed the folder gently. Treat it like any other application. I said, if she doesn't meet the criteria, she doesn't move forward. Leona studied me carefully, as if measuring whether I meant it. All right, we'll handle it by the book. When she left, I sat staring at Marina's name on the resume, the edges of the paper still warm from my hands. The irony was almost too sharp, banned from Thanksgiving because of her successful boyfriend. And now she was knocking unknowingly on my door for validation. And fate, it seemed, was about to hand us both a reckoning neither of us had asked for. The following afternoon, I took my seat at the far end of the conference table, introduced only as part of the leadership team observing interviews. From my vantage point, I watched Marina sweep into the room, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. She carried herself as if she already belonged, her smile bright and rehearsed. The panel began with the usual questions. Devin, our technical director, asked her to walk through a project where she had managed complex systems. Marina launched into a vague story about coordinating teams across multiple channels, never naming a single platform or process. When pressed about methodologies, she brushed it off with a laugh. I don't get lost in the weeds. My value is vision and connections. Details are for the technical staff. Sophie, our senior strategist, exchanged a glance with Devon, both of them unimpressed. Still, Marina pushed forward, dropping names of acquaintances she barely knew, sprinkling in buzzwords like confetti. Then, Jasmine, head of HR, turned to me with the smooth professionalism I had asked of her. Before we close, our CEO would like to pose a few questions. I stood. The air in the room shifted as I walked toward the head of the table. Marina's eyes widened, recognition dawning slowly, then all at once. Her smile faltered. "Hello, Marina," I said evenly. "It's been a while." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You're the CEO. I nodded, sliding her resume toward me. "According to this, you served as an executive consultant at Blake & Co. until last year. But I spoke with one of their partners last month, and they recalled you as an assistant. Can you clarify color rose in her cheeks?" "Titles are flexible," she muttered, "and you've listed proficiency in Python." I continued, "Could you outline how you'd structure a basic API call?" Her silence answered for her. I closed the folder. "Thank you for your time. HR will follow up." She gathered her papers with trembling hands, the mask slipping as she hurried from the room. And I knew, as the door shut behind her, that the reckoning had only begun. I hadn't even had time to sit back at my desk when the door flew open. Marina stormed in, cheeks flushed, eyes sharp with anger. "What the hell was that?" she demanded, slamming her portfolio down on the table. "You humiliated me in front of strangers. You planned this." I kept my voice steady. "You applied for a senior position you weren't qualified for. What you experienced was a standard interview." Before she could reply, the receptionist buzzed my line. "Your parents are here," she said, hesitant. "They insist on speaking with you." Seconds later, Gregory and Elaine entered, their expressions grim. My father didn't bother with pleasantries. "Family helps family," he declared. "You're in a position to give your sister this job. Do it." I rose slowly, meeting his eyes. "This company stands on merit, not favors. I won't undermine what I've built to protect Marina from consequences." Elaine tried to soften the blow. "Celeste, think about what this could mean for her. She's been struggling. A chance here could turn things around." "I'm not denying her a chance," I said. "But it will be an entry-level role, where she can learn and prove herself like everyone else." Marina scoffed. "Entry-level. After all I've done, you've always been jealous. Celeste, always trying to prove you're better." Something in me snapped. "Jealous." My voice shook, but not from weakness. "I worked 3 jobs to pay for school while you got a car at 16. I built this company without a dime of support, while you bounced from one failed venture to the next. And even now, after Forbes and 2 offices and contracts worth millions, all you see is someone who should shrink so you can shine." Silence filled the room. For once, no one interrupted me, and in that silence, I realized I had finally spoken aloud what I had carried in my chest since childhood. The fallout came quickly. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances that Marina had been let go from her firm. Not long after, Adrian disappeared from her social media feeds, their carefully staged photos vanishing as if they had never existed. For the first time in her life, Marina was without both status and a safety net of borrowed prestige. 2 weeks later, my building's concierge called up to say my parents were in the lobby. I almost told him to turn them away. Instead, curiosity or maybe habit made me buzz them in. They looked smaller in my living room than I remembered. Gregory's shoulders slumped, Elaine's eyes scanning the walls as though searching for pieces of a daughter she had never bothered to know. "Thank you for seeing us," my mother began, her voice tentative. "We should have come sooner." Gregory cleared his throat. "Marina's been having a hard time. We hoped well. We hoped you might consider helping her." The request hung in the air like smoke, but for once, they didn't press. Elaine surprised me by asking, quietly, "How did you do it?" "Celeste, build all this on your own?" I told them, pieces late nights. Endless rejections, the stubborn belief that no one could take away what I built with my own hands. And as I spoke, I saw something shift in her face. Not pride, not yet, but recognition. It didn't erase the years of silence or favoritism, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever received. When they left, the apartment felt strangely quiet, as if their presence had unsettled something I'd kept locked away. And soon enough, Marina herself would come knocking. Spring turned into summer before I saw Marina again. She came to the office dressed simply, her resume pared down to the truth. Gone were the inflated titles and grand claims. She applied for an entry-level marketing coordinator position, and this time she made no requests for special treatment. When the offer came, she accepted without hesitation. On her first day, she stopped by my office, standing in the doorway like someone unsure of her welcome. "I want to do this right," she said quietly. "I'll start at the bottom if that's what it takes." I nodded, not offering forgiveness, but something steadier opportunity. Months later, an invitation arrived in the mail. My parents were celebrating their 40th anniversary. There was no caveat, no carefully worded exclusion, just a simple request. "Please join us." I went, not out of longing, but curiosity. The dining room looked the same as it had when I was a child, the oak table, the crystal glasses. But something was different. A seat had been set for me without hesitation, as though it had always been mine. Conversation stumbled at times, old habits lingering. But when Marina asked me about work, it wasn't with envy, it was with interest. As we raised our glasses to toast, I realized I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. What I wanted, what I had built, was respect, and that was finally beginning to take shape. Family, I thought, isn't about the ones who keep you waiting in the shadows. It's about the ones who make room when you walk through the door. And that night, for the first time in years, I sat at the table as myself,